Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Hope the week has gone well. It's getting terribly hot here in Nairobi. Political reflections, photo du jour. British Prime Minister Theresa May greeted by the EU Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker at the first working session of yesterday's EU summit in Brussels. That photograph was Stéphane Rousseau. Sky News revealed that the UK armed forces have activated a team in a nuclear bunker beneath the Ministry of Defence to step up preparations for a no-deal Brexit. The EU 27 responded to UK requests in a positive spirit, said the EU President Donald Tusk. Agrees to an Article 50 extension until 22nd May if withdrawal agreement is approved next week. If not agreed next week, then extension until 12th April, approves Strasbourg agreement and continues no-deal preparations. Emmanuel Macron said it's no deal on Brexit if British MPs reject the accord again, which seems inevitable. And therefore, like I predicted, the Brexit decider is the Élysée and is in fact Emmanuel Macron. So we continue to see a very volatile environment. I don't see how May can thread this needle, and therefore I was asking yesterday of somebody I follow, Forex Flow Live, what I had to pay for 125 puts, one touch. It's quite expensive because we had a big move yesterday, but nevertheless, to give you an inkling, I think the political scenario is pointing at a no-deal Brexit. After 52 years, it is time for the United States to fully recognize Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights, which is of critical strategic and security importance to the state of Israel and regional stability. That was tweeted by the President of the United States. WikiLeaks, Trump endorses Israeli annexation of Western Syria after 52 years of occupation as Israeli Prime Minister faces April election amid corruption charges. I agree with Carl Bildt, who said this: the jungle is back. This is a catastrophic departure from the very basis of international law. The Kremlin will applaud and apply the same principle to Crimea. Beijing will applaud and apply to South China Sea and. It is really an unprecedented departure from international law. Trump told an audience he didn't get a thank you for McCain's funeral, which he apparently approved. And I asked, was he expecting it telepathically? Did he participate in a seance? Maria Bartiromo says, but Mr. President, he's dead. He can't punch back. I know you punch back, Bartiromo, but he's dead. And that is really an extraordinary scenario. One of the best movies ever made was called Apocalypse Now in 1979 by Francis Ford Coppola. This is the surf and napalm scene via Cine Arte. I still can't get over the narrative disruption, the visual, symbolic narrative disruption that came from this photograph of a biker gang providing an escort to a hearse transporting the coffin of Haji Muhammad Dawood Nabi, killed in New Zealand's twin mosque attacks. I am so impressed with the New Zealand Prime Minister, who vowed never to utter the name of the twin mosque gunman to deprive him of the publicity he craved. And this is something that I wrote about in the Brothers Saneev and the Long Tail. And I was quoting Camus, the Byronic hero, incapable of love, capable only of an impossible love, suffers endlessly. He is solitary, languid, his condition exhausts him. If he wants to feel alive, it must be in the terrible exaltation of a brief and destructive action. and to the point about narration, narrative control, and narrative disruption, which this New Zealand Prime Minister has achieved. I take you to Don DeLillo, Mao too. I used to think it was possible for an artist to alter the inner life of the culture. Now bomb makers and gunmen have taken that territory. Jacinda warned social media companies, saying they are the publisher, not just the postman. Powerful, isn't she? And then going back to DeLillo again, terror's response is a narrative that has been developing over years, only now becoming inescapable. It is our lives and minds that are occupied now. This catastrophic event changes the way we think and act, moment to moment, week to week. For unknown weeks and months to come, in steely years, our world, parts of our world have crumbled into theirs, which means we are living in a place of danger and rage. Take you back to September 2012, when you might have forgotten there was this Floridian pastor called Basile, and he lit a Quran, and the story was that in response to that act, the embassy in Libya, the US embassy in Libya, was burnt down. And I asked then, what are the consequences of this 21st century madding crowd? A madding crowd that can be inflamed by a fellow with a camera and an account with YouTube. They are the publisher, not just the postman. And I said there are plenty of flamethrowers in a population of 7 billion. Basile has shown that the 21st century equivalent of throwing the match is a camera and the knowledge of how to upload content onto YouTube. The consequences of throwing a match onto a tinderbox are entirely unpredictable by their nature. We also learned that donations are being sought for the boy's defense, the egg thrower, and to buy more eggs. Let's move on to Abu Dhabi. Mohammed bin Zayed, the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, offered to set up a covert assassination program targeting senior Taliban leaders during a meeting with the US Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. According to a source with detailed knowledge, bin Zayed told Pompeo that Washington risked allowing Afghanistan to fall back into the hands of backward, bearded bad guys, and proposed hiring mercenaries to kill Taliban leaders to weaken the group's negotiating position. That's his standard position, actually, MBZ. Pompeo was visibly taken back by the offer but said nothing. Zayed warned Pompeo that withdrawing American forces from Afghanistan risked turning back the clock to 2001, prior to the US-led invasion that overthrew the Taliban government in Kabul. Bin Zayed suggested instead organizing and funding what he described as a Blackwater-style operation to wage an assassination campaign against the first-line leadership of the Taliban in order to prevent it from achieving its political demands. It's the same tactic, killing and talking. This is a photograph of the inside of the Grand Mosque in Abu Dhabi. This is of an Apache helicopter flying over that Grand Mosque, which I thought particularly apposite. And this is of the Louvre, Abu Dhabi, which is a really lovely art gallery. In November 2017, writing about MBS, I said the paranoia in the palaces in Saudi Arabia is real and existential. And what is also clear is that Netanyahu, MBZ, Jared Kushner, and POTUS carte blanche have all leveraged this existential paranoia. Over the weekend, I wrote about the Boeing 737 MAX 8 and the Ethiopian Flight 302 and the FAA. There have been considerable further developments, but in that article I was saying the message Boeing was sending was that safety came second, and that's a simply untenable position, and that eventually the FAA capitulated and grounded the 737 MAX. It's now transpired that the FAA allowed Boeing to carry out its own flawed safety analysis of the 737 MAX. Due to the plane's relatively forward engine placement, its nose was liable to drift upwards during flight, a characteristic that could lead to engine stalls. The MCAS system was designed to make micro adjustments to the tail's angle to push the nose back down and counteract this. The MCAS system relied on only one sensor to read the nose angle. Development of the 737 MAX was rushed as Boeing was competing to bring the plane to market before Airbus A320neo. One pilot said his training involved little more than a 1-hour session with an iPad with no simulator hours. In that article I wrote, I said the FAA lacks a chief. Trump nominated his own pilot, John Duncan, the man who flew Trump planes, to head it. The Senate laughed him off as unqualified. Trump failed to come up with a new name. Edward Luce in the FT says the FAA has been flying without a pilot, so to speak, for more than a year. And I was writing in my article that Boeing has taken a big hit, but more worryingly, the corporate's reactions to a fast-moving situation were a D-. Ethiopian Airlines expresses its disappointment on the following wrong reporting of the New York Times, titled Ethiopian Airlines had a MAX 8 simulator but pilot on doomed flight didn't receive training. I said the lack of touch and finesse displayed by Boeing over the last 7 days is mind-boggling. They have stayed resolutely behind the curve from the get-go.